Welcome to another installment of Masters of Craft.
The name of the game is if you pay for it, you own it, right? And I'm sure you heard that before. That is almost implying that your creative contribution does not have the same value as the money that's being put up to produce it, which I totally disagree with. Yes, the money's necessary, but the money can't create this without that element. But you can create that without the money element. It just would take longer and it would be a lot harder. But the idea or the vision of it is just as significant. And I think right now, I think there's a need for artists and creatives to have a more equitable situation with the studios, because what we bring into the table is just as valuable, if not more valuable, than the money that's being put up to make it. I had this picture in my mind like of this dystopian future where like AI and NFTs and digital, like all of these things would basically destroy humanity. And I've been following AI for a long time, and I've been studying transhumanism, and I just had a very grim picture of what the future is gonna look like. And then, Love, she was like, okay, so yeah, maybe AI will get to a place where it is doing everybody's jobs. But then wouldn't that create an opportunity for people to start to think on another level?
Hey, Carl.
Hey.
How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm sitting like this.
Yeah, I admire that. You know what I'm saying? Your flexibility game is on point.
Well, wait till the end of the interview. Welcome to another installment of Masters of Craft. I'm your host, Chris Denson. In case you guys are tuning in for the first time, the show covers all things ingenuity, really. The people who are charging paths forward that are uncommon. So I applaud you for charging paths that are uncommon.
Oh, thank you.
Also, thank you to the FYI team, Focus Your Ideas, Will.i.am, for allowing us to use this lovely space. And thank you for being here. Why were you born in Germany?
That's a good question. Why was I born in Germany? Well, I had a parent that was in the military, so that's really the reason why. But I wasn't in Germany for that long. I think I moved back to the States when I was maybe one, a little younger. Yeah.
So you don't go back for like family reunions and Nuremberg.
Go back to see all the babies I met in the nursery.
Right, exactly. It'd be a weird reunion. It'd be like all the babies that were born in a certain hospital, they should have hospital reunions.
Yeah. I wouldn't know what they're talking about because they're all German, I'm sure. But
sauerkraut.
Yeah.
The your company, Martian Blueberry, is like honestly one of my favorite company names. Period.
Oh, wow.
Like and it just spoke to you and the brand and the team and the things you've created. And I would love to hear your interpretation of what that name means to you.
So the name is another way of saying strange fruit, right? It's kind of I guess a more lighthearted, fun way of saying strange fruit. And strange fruit, I'm sure most people are familiar, but Billie Holiday had a really popular song called Strange Fruit. And it also is, they're actually like these marble-sized stones that are extraterrestrial in origin. So they've been found on Mars by the Mars rover, but there have been some that have been located on Earth as well. And so some Native American shaman used the Martian blueberries as like a conduit, to the spiritual world, but they also use it to heal, and it is just a big part of in certain Native American cultures, the bringing the spiritual world and the physical world together,
Did you know all that before you came up with the name, or did you learn it after the fact?
I did. Because I had a friend of mine who actually brought back some from a Native American tribe. I can't remember which tribe, but he brought like a handful of them back to me as a gift, and I was like, at that time I hadn't heard of him, so he's like, yo, they're Martian blueberries. I'm like, that's a really dope name. And so he just started telling me about it, and I just went down a rabbit hole and started researching, and I was just like, that's amazing. And then, so when I was thinking of a name for a company, I wanted to go with Strange Fruit at one time. And I thought, you know what? This is actually a more creative way of saying that.
Mm-hmm. That's great. How did the blueberries taste?
No,
I'm kidding.
I said you definitely want to eat these.
I had a feeling you were a nerd because I love a piece of information comes your way that's intriguing, and then you go down the rabbit hole. You just regurgitated a bunch of stuff I've never heard of. I tried to look up what Martian blueberries were.
Yeah.
And I feel like the intersection of you growing up in North Carolina and for 12 months in Germany, and entering animation at a time that you did, it was probably not as cool as it is now. Is that true? Or like, and tell me like what that, your early entrance into the animation world.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I grew up in Fayetteville, North Carolina, and there was nobody doing anything remotely close to what I wanted to do with my life and what I ended up doing. But I did grow up on a street called Bedrock, which I thought that could be possible omen. I was a big fan of the Flintstones. But when I was growing up,
Trey Songz.
Trey Songz.
I can make your bed rock.
That's hilarious. I didn't know that song, but
okay. Well, I'll send it to you.
Yeah. But no, I always had this passion for drawing and cartooning and comedy and writing, but I didn't really discover that until later. But long story short, I got my first opportunity to work in animation doing a project for Rockefeller Films. It was called The Playpen, right? And this was at the time when Jay-Z and Dame Dash were still talking. They were still together.
Still buddies.
Right? This was at the height. Right. This was at the height of Rockefeller. So I got brought onto this project called The Playpen, right? And The Playpen was basically a story. It was basically a show about the Rockefeller rappers, you know what I'm saying, as babies in this daycare center that's like a correctional facility. So instead of nap time, they had lights out and, you know what I mean, that kind of thing. So I came out to New York and I started developing the show, and Beanie Siegel got arrested for attempted murder. So that kind of killed the cartoon, all puns intended. So after that, I basically decided to pack up everything and move out to LA. It's a more interesting thing that happened right before I did that. I think it's kind of funny and dangerous at the same time, because I used to sell a lot of bootleg movies. That was my career for a long time. I was like the Tony Montana of bootleg movies and mixtapes, and I was selling bootleg watches and clothes and all that stuff. Hitting the barbershops and and so
Roscoe's. Did I ever see you outside of Roscoe's?
No. This is in North Carolina.
Sure. Oh,
this is North Carolina.
Like, I knew you.
I didn't sell you that bad movie, but it's funny because I almost like lost my life over a flubber movie. Because I used to set up like right behind the projects at this convenience store. So one day this guy brings a movie back and he's like, "Yo, I'm watching this movie with my daughter," and all of a sudden there's a man that just walks up, gets up and walks in front of the screen, and I'm like, and he's like, "I want my money back," and I'm like, "Well, when you go to see a real movie and someone gets up and they walk in front of your view, you can't go get your money back," which I thought was really clever, but he didn't. So he left out. I say about 20, 30 minutes later, I see this car roll up into the gas station, and I was set up in front of my van. I had like a table, a big spread of movies and stuff, and I see this car rolling up, and the guy is in the passenger seat, but he's got like this arm down and this arm on the window, which is not a good sign. And then my spidey senses kicked in, and I grabbed my boy, and I was like, "Yo, get down." And as soon as I said that, he pulls out a gun and just like starts spraying up. He shot the glass out of my van, and then he just like, he peels off, and my boy was like, "Yo, let's go get him." I'm like, "Yo, you can go get him." I'm going home. And I remember I went home and I sat on the edge of my bed, and that was a moment for me. I was like, "Yo, what am I doing with my life?" I'm like, and mind you, at this time, I had like a drawing table, crammed in my kitchen with like boxes of sketches and ideas and stuff just all my dreams and things I wanted to do. And eventually I just built up the courage to just pack up and take that hike.
Yeah. It's like, what do you do with the box of dreams? Like, I feel that poetry. In terms of, life decisions. And what was it like to leave? I feel like there's multiple points in life where you leave something familiar behind and enter into a new space, and you also bring with you skills, and you also do away with some behaviors or things that you experienced. Tell me about the evolution of Carl Jones and how you revisited certain cycles and evolved and changed who you were.
It's a good question. I don't know. I think I'm always learning something. I'm always one thing I think that I've learned over the years, I think is really how to pace myself, because when I first got into the industry, I was always someone that, I was really passionate and I was really eager to like, to try to translate whatever I have in my imagination on the screen and making sure that it is exactly the way I had it envisioned. But you're working with a lot of moving pieces and a lot of other people with different opinions and thoughts, and some of them are actually paying for your project. So being able to adapt to this world where like everyone is having input on your art and the direction it should go and how it should be perceived by the world is something I struggle with a little bit. I still struggle with it, but I've gotten better because I realized that like this is a marathon you're running, right? So like, you might be able to, you might throw a fight in this first part of the war, but then you could remove yourself from opportunities that could exist if you just played along with the game and maybe got a couple of the things that you want to see, and then it's a give and take type of thing. And eventually you get to a place where you're standing high enough where you can call more shots and actually make more decisions without having so many other people's outside opinions. But I didn't know that in the beginning, so I was fighting everything. And after, falling down a few times and, bruising up, getting bruised and banged up a few times, you realize like, okay, I gotta focus on the much bigger goal here and figure out a way to maneuver through this maze and make certain compromises when necessary in order to get to a place where I'll be able to help other people not have to make those compromises at all,
Yeah. What was, I don't know, like I love that story, and I think about how there might be a moment where rock bottom. Right? Was there a rock bottom along that way where you're like, okay, this has to change, and or was there like a mentor or person for you to kind of tap into to give you some advice and some direction?
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't say rock bottom, but there was a moment on the Boondocks, which was like my first real show that I actually produced. The Boondocks, the first season out the gate, we were having some monstrous problems. It was hard finding artists that understood anime, because most of the artists that are here domestically, they come from Cal Arts and they do a lot more traditional, Cartoon Network, Saturday morning type of cartoons. So we were looking for artists, and then Sony at that time, none of us really had much TV experience, so Sony was making a lot of decisions for us and putting people in place, and they were the wrong people, but they didn't understand the vision. And so we ended up like revising whole episodes over and over and over again because the storyboards would be wrong, the designs would be wrong. They didn't quite understand the culture. So it got to a point where we ran the risk of the show not even being producible, So that's when you got to start really making some compromises. And there was a guy he was a supervising director on the show at the time, Bob Hathcock, who was like, he'd been in the game for a long time. I think he like worked on the Smurfs, like,
Wow.
What I'm saying?
And an unfortunate last name.
Yes. But Bob, he sat me down and he was like, look, he said, if you get 70% of your vision on the screen, it's a success. He said, you got to think about it that way. He said, you'll never get more than 90. He said, so don't even set yourself up for that failure, and that stayed with me to this day.
That's great. Yeah. Look, I mean, we talk a lot about innovation on this show, and especially like the ecosystem and the operating systems of how innovation happens. Mm-hmm. And one of the big things I like to focus on is consensus, right? Because there's a philosophy I told my son recently. It was like, there's a different version of you that lives inside the head of everyone you've ever met.
Wow.
Right, which is kind of trippy, right? So I think the same thing happens with an idea.
Profound.
Like when you hear an idea, when somebody else hears an idea, and then especially in animation, because you have to make it from scratch. It's not like, oh, we have this actor and we know his stature and what he looks, there's a different kind of vision you need to bring forth, and you have to communicate it kind of ethereally, maybe with some sketches. But, what have you learned about getting consensus and getting everybody rallied around the vision and the mission versus, the nuance of and the minutia of how it is going to look as a finished product?
Yeah, I think the most important thing that I've learned over the years is not to be such a dictator and be more of an inspirer. You know what I mean? Like, especially when you're dealing with artists, you know, artists don't really want to be told what to do, really, you know, and if they're working on your vision, there's not a lot of room for them to express their own personal creativity. So what I've learned is give them a little bit more room to explore, right, the things that they actually are passionate about and that they bring to the table themselves. And it's not an easy thing to do, you know, but I found that giving them room to do what they do best and bringing that to your vision, you end up finding new paths that you never would have discovered had you not opened up those doors. So there's a lot of things that I see on shows that I made to this day where I look back and I go, wow, I would have never thought of that. You know,
it's also weird because I think like sometimes as a creative, your gut will tell you one thing, and then you're getting feedback, and you're like, ah. And sometimes your gut works, and you're like, see, I told you. And then other times you're like, I'm glad you told me that idea that I resisted.
Yeah.
And you know, instinct and those sorts of things when they play into the creative process can kind of be challenging.
Yeah.
I mean, can you speak to that in some way?
Yeah, I think it starts with working with people that you have a certain amount of trust. There's got to be a certain amount of trust there already. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't trust everyone's taste. So when they're pitching something, it may not resonate with me sometimes just because I don't trust your taste. I don't know. It could actually be a good idea, but if your taste is questionable, then your ideas probably will be too, you know. But what I like to do, especially in a writer's room environment, is I don't like to have any kind of hierarchy in the room. Right, like everyone is basically on the same level, you know. That way, regardless of what your titles are, like you put them, you leave them at the door because I think it's such a sacred place for ideas, and you want people to feel valued, and you want people's ideas to be received well. So I always tell everybody: if you're a PA, writer's assistant, if you're a janitor that's coming through the room, if you got an idea, you overhear something, like pitch it, you know. But you got to create that kind of energy and that kind of environment where people feel okay to do that, because you're being really vulnerable when you pitch anything. You know, to this day, I'm even nervous when I pitch stuff, you know, but I think when you have that kind of atmosphere and you have people that you develop a somewhat of a trust with, you become like a family, and you know, it's a little easier to make those kind of decisions on whether or not to go with your own instinct or go with someone else's, because you know it's a think tank that you can trust, at least, you know.
What makes you nervous about pitching?
Everything. Everything. I hate pitching so much. And it's funny because everybody's like, but you do so well. Like, you sold shows and stuff. And I don't know how, because in my mind, this is going horribly. You know, I think the main, especially during this, like right now, because everybody's on Zoom, pitching on Zoom is the worst. Right. You know, when you're pitching in the room, at least in a real room with real people, you know, you can feel the energy and the feedback. And on Zoom, everyone's got their mics off. You know, some people got their cameras off. You don't know what they're really thinking. You don't know if they're laughing. You don't hear anything. It's like doing stand-up to just a wall. Like, you know, and you don't want to really focus on too many people's expressions, because that can sometimes throw you off. So it's a whole thing. But just the fact that, like, you're putting an idea out there and allowing people to look for reasons to say no and to tear it apart and to pick it apart. Now, that's not the only thing they can do. They can also say, this is amazing and we love it. But when you put it in context and you know that they're hearing maybe 20 or 30 of these a day, it's kind of, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. It's a little overwhelming and intimidating. So I don't know. And I'm a little bit of an introvert myself. I'm not naturally just a person that just talks a lot. Thus, I have this hoodie on, you know, because it's kind of like my Linus blanket. It makes me feel, you know, it's like a turtle shell or something. I feel a little bit more protected. But yeah, I don't know. It's very nervous. I get nervous.
Yeah, no, it's trippy. I mean, because it's. I mean, I interviewed a guy once who was a cannabis pioneer, and he said he pitched his business 198 times before they saw $1, right? Before anybody said yes. So that same, and I was like, you know, if you're pitching a concept for the 20th time, like, how are you hitting the refresh button to go in and like, all right, we're gonna try again, or this is the third meeting with the same company, and you're like, I guess, don't you get the concept already?
But you know what I do? I usually have to become another character, like a kind of an alter ego.
Thugnificent?
Not quite Thugnificent. You wouldn't sell shit if I was being Thugnificent. But it is like a slightly alternative version of myself. And it's funny you said that because I know the guy that founded Amazon, Jeff Bezos.
Yes.
He was talking about how it took him 60 meetings to raise $1 million for Amazon.
Right.
And I was just like that. And this is Jeff Bezos. You know what I'm saying? So, that's just, it's just hard. Pitching anything is hard. Because part of it is also the art of selling yourself. And if you're, and unless you're extremely narcissistic and felt very self-absorbed, that's not an easy thing for most people to do, to sell yourself. You can do it naturally, I guess, without focusing on selling yourself. But, it takes some thought, and it takes a lot of, it takes a very special thing that I had to develop over years, because in the beginning, I think I was horrible at it,
I think one of the things is grossly underestimated in animation is cost and expertise, and the assumptions that people make when they want to say yes. Years ago, I almost sold a show, and then they told me what the budget was going to be, and I was like, I can only make a couple. Like, don't you you don't understand what it actually takes, let alone your expertise and your value that you're bringing to the table. I don't know if that's your experience, or or if you've had inklings or elements. That's what
that works. That works.
Increments is not a thing.
No, let's roll with elements.
Elements of that show up in your world, and how you navigate that sort of perception of value and worth.
That's a great point to bring up. This is one of the things that I kind of, I guess, preach about all the time, because Hollywood has this notion that the name of the game is, if you pay for it, you own it, right? And I'm sure you heard that before, but that is almost implying that your creative contribution does not have the same value as the money that's being put up to produce it, which I totally disagree with. The money can fund multiple projects, right? The money, I'm saying, yes, the money's necessary, but the money can't create this without that element, right? But you can create that without the money element. It just would take longer, and it would be a lot harder. But the idea or the vision of it is just as significant. And I think right now, I think there's a need for artists and creatives to have a more equitable situation with the studios, because what we bring into the table is just as valuable, if not more valuable, than the money that's being put up to make it, And I think being able to understand our value gives us a lot more legs to stand on. But when we don't, for me, just being in Hollywood at all and having a TV show in the air was just everything. That was all I cared about. You know what I'm saying? Even if I was still broke, I just loved the fact that I had something that was on TV, or something that was in the trades, to see my name in the Hollywood Reporter. And that's a lot of us, because most of us we don't come from wealth, and, most of us, you know what I'm saying? So, but I think now we have to look at things a little differently in order for us to not have to strike for 3 or 4 months to show or prove to someone that we have value and that we should be compensated for our work. We shouldn't even have to do that. But I think if there's opportunities to establish that mentally, first, it'll change the way we do our contracts.
How has the AI conversation changed both your craft and your business?
That's a great question too. So in the beginning, I was completely against AI. It's like I saw AI as the Terminator. I just wanted to destroy the idea of AI, right? But as I began to really, really think about it, one, it's not going anywhere, right? Two, I was really fighting this from the wrong angle, because what we should be more concerned about is how our data is being mined for free versus the actual threat of AI as a whole. I think AI is a very powerful tool that can be used to, it can be used for many different things that I think help to liberate people and free creatives to also focus more on the conceptual side of creation and actually than the logistical stuff, right? So that's one thing. But if we start to truly understand that there is no Chat GPT without our data, there is no autonomous cars without our data, there's no AI without our data, we should be monetizing our data. We should not be giving away our data for free so that data can be used to replace the job that you have. You know what I'm saying?
Wow.
You should be monetizing the data so that you are either you have equity in the platform that's monetizing the data, or you actually have some type of residual that you receive off of each usage of that data. You know, so to answer your question, how it's affecting what we're building with Martian Blueberry, although it's a creative agency, there's also a tech side to it that has to. I mean, I think for any thriving business today, you got to have a tech side to it in order for it to.
Absolutely.
Because you're going to have to integrate it in some kind of way. So we are working to develop a platform that is integrated into Web3 and blockchain technology that gives, it basically allows people, anyone that brings value, whether it's creatives or people that are fans of the work that we create, if they're bringing any type of value to the table, we're offering them an opportunity to have a digital asset or property rights as well. Yeah.
The resistance part of that dialogue kind of stuck with me because resistance sometimes is what makes us fall behind, and like we don't get the opportunity to use that tool, that technology, that and be a part of the future. It's like Blockbuster was very resistant to Netflix, and we see what happens. But then also, like everything you just said is kind of ahead of the curve. So what was the learning curve for you to go like, oh, okay, I see the potential of all these technologies. Like, how do you nerd out and kind of get informed and then make the decision to apply it to your business or your craft or not?
Well, the learning curve actually happened, and I got a little sidetracked because the learning curve actually happened when we took a deep dive into Web3 and NFTs. And the reason why we did that is because I can't say the name of the show, but I was working on a show that I was.
What was it called?
I can't say the name of the show. Okay. I was working on the show because I want to say it, and if you ask me again, I probably will.
Which show was it?
But we had a situation where I didn't quite agree with the direction it was going in, and I was removed from that show. Right so I whatever ideas I had and whatever creative I brought to the table was no longer mine, and that at that moment I began to like really focus on a way to get around this from happening ever again. Right, so I took a deep dive into Web3 and NFTs and started learning about decentralized financing and DAOs and all this stuff, right? And so we launched an NFT project called Bubble Goose Ballers, right? And we launched it right at the beginning of the bear market. So it was like the market was doing, at the time it was doing pretty bad. So everybody kind of advised us not to do it, but we launched it anyway, and we sold out 10,000 NFTs in less than an hour on the Solana blockchain. And we built a really strong community around this project. And since then, we've been on this like really beautiful path of building a brand around this. But when we did that, it really taught us a lot, and just not only about Web3 and NFTs, but how AI, if the future of the world is going to be, in some way rooted in AI, then it only makes sense that the financial transactions that would be taking place would need some type of ledger, right, in order to create any kind of, fingerprint, you know what I'm saying, for the moves that are being made with AI, but also any financial transactions that are taking place would have to be done with some type of cryptocurrency, right? So at that point, we realized that AI and Web3 basically work hand in hand as well as with gaming, right? So we just begin to form this whole picture very quickly on how content creation, AI, and Web3 are all basically moving in towards the same intersection. Right. You
sound like an ecosystem thinker, especially as an executive producer and all the things you've done. But then there's like, I'll reference Thugnificent again, only because I think there's honing in on just the entertainment moment that you want to create and not having to think about, is it going to work here? Is it going to, all the other bells and how do you turn off the macro and get into the micro and go back and forth between those two states?
I mean, it's all one thing to me. You know what I mean? It's kind of like the idea of like a fractal universe, right? That we live in, where like, everything within the micro is also contained within the macro. Like, and what I mean by that is just that, like, I don't know how to make a decision that in some way does not affect our entire organization or the future of the company, right? So like, it's just, and I think, and I don't know where that way of thinking has come from. Probably a lot of it came from my anxiety because, having like high anxiety, you have a tendency to like go way past what most people might think could play out, like the worst case possible scenario. So like I go to a party, if I'm planning to go to a party, I start already thinking about where this could potentially go, and it's because you mix the anxiety with imagination, and sometimes it's a really bad thing to deal with, right? But I think having that kind of thinking keeps me up at night, constantly thinking of, okay, so if we launch this today, what is that going to look like a year from now, and then a year from now, how can we position ourselves so that 10 years from now we'll be? I think because I'm afraid that it will all collapse at any moment. Right. I'm constantly thinking of ways to stay ahead of ourselves so that doesn't happen.
It's interesting when weakness is a strong word, but when something like that becomes a superpower, right? And I think almost like every superhero origin story comes from some place of loneliness or loss or something like that. Even myself, like imposter syndrome has been such a big part of why I do excellent things, right? Because I'm like, ooh, everybody's gonna think I'm fake if I don't do all the things, which can feel anxious at times, but other times it's like I can recognize it as a superpower. Was there a point where you saw a shift in your relationship with anxiety and how you learned to harness it rather than succumb to it?
Yeah, I have to say my wife has helped me a lot with that, because she...
Is that why she's here today?
She's everywhere with me because of that, probably. But no, because, for example, right, like even with AI and NFTs, because my son was telling me about NFTs for a long time too, and I was just kind of like, I had this picture in my mind like of this dystopian future where like AI and NFTs and digital, like all of these things would basically destroy humanity. And this was kind of my mind. And I've been following AI for a long time, and I've been studying transhumanism and like Ray Kurzweil and these guys, and thinking about like, I just had a very grim picture of what the future is going to look like. And then, Love, like one day she'll just bring up like these like ideas that go against everything that I believe in, but it would make sense, right? Yeah. She was like, well, okay, yeah. So like, she was like, okay, so yeah, maybe AI will get to a place where it is doing everybody's jobs. She said, but then wouldn't that create an opportunity for people to start to think on another level and actually develop new ways to do things and reinvent, and I was just like, damn, okay, I could see that, and she would do this. She would poke holes in a lot of my theories every now and then in a good way, because it kind of like deflates this giant, massive like fear that I might have, and I can actually see things for what they really are,
I don't share this theory often, and I definitely haven't done it in a recorded environment. But I have this theory, we talk about the fourth industrial revolution and the previous industrial revolutions that have just changed, and like, when people have that fear mongering around AI, it's like the same thing with the steam engine, the same thing with the phonograph. It's like musicians thought their jobs were going to be taken away because they were going venue to venue.
That's true.
And then they're like, please don't make this records, right? Don't. Yeah. And then next thing you know, it birthed the record industry. And I think part of me feels like we don't have anything left to make. Like when we can invent things or whatever, but I feel like with this sort of AI kind of doing a lot of things that are going to, like you said, just like take away jobs, it is this time to revisit who we are as humanity, right?
Yes.
And it's like we're searching inward. I was on I'll let you talk in a minute, but I was on a boat in Cannes Lions, and there was a bunch of black executives talking about AI and how they were like, that job that I had, that got me to where I am, the entry level job is now going to be gone. And my mindset was like, well, we should be teaching people how to think, because this happens every so often, these cycles of change and shift. And
that's
like,
right.
Jobs are lost. What we used to do no longer exists, and so on and so forth. But if we can teach people adaptability, especially like younger generations, and like the emotional intelligence of what it means to think differently. Go ahead.
No. Bro, we think the same, because, I mean, that's the thing, right? Like AI, it is mental intelligence, right? So anything that requires memory, essentially AI can do. But emotional intelligence is something that, yes, humans possess this very unique and special that we a lot of times just we don't give it the kind of attention that it deserves, right? So this will kind of force us to do that in a lot of ways, because you won't have to use your mind as much, and you can actually tap into these other ways to experience the world and experience different realities even outside of your own, because we don't even know we're just basically scratching the surface of what our emotional intelligence even is and what it's capable of. So I would imagine that in a future where anything that essentially requires, our mental capacity is pretty much covered for us, we would have nothing else left to do but to explore the emotional intelligence that and our interconnectedness, because that is something else that I think when we get so caught up in our minds and our thoughts and our opinions, it also creates division between people, because those ideas and those beliefs and all of those different things, they become barriers. A lot of times we have them, we think, to protect ourselves, but then they also become kind of walls that can imprison you into your own ideas. But when you start removing those thoughts, then you allow people to just connect on a heart level, right? Without any kind of beliefs or whatever. And so I do. And like I said, love helped me to start moving down that road and start to see it through a different lens. And now I'm understanding how these things can be used as just tools. Because at the end of the day, and I'll just sum it up with this, is with AI, especially in the creative industry, you still have human beings at the end of both spectrums of that equation, right? So you're creating content for humans, and it initially is going to start with the concept that is created by a human in order for it to actually reach another human, right? Because it has to be meaningful. In order for it to be meaningful, it has to in some way tap into some type of emotional intelligence, right? Like, I don't think AI could have created Star Wars from scratch, You know what I mean? So I think it's good at executing another Star Wars if you needed to, but the initial vision for it came from a passion, came from a creative, passionate place. And people connected with it because it meant something to them because it came from a passionate, creative place. So I still think at the end of the day, people are in the equation.
No, I feel like it comes like somebody goes, how can I? And then that's when you start exploring what the tool might allow you to do. Lot of thoughts. This is what introverts think about all day.
That's definitely what I think about all day.
I feel like you probably could have gone for like another 20 minutes on the whole topic. So as an introvert, though, you Google the name Carl Jones, and there's like a ton of articles. You're basically saving Black culture. There's a lot. Like, I feel like there's a pressure that comes from that, or maybe, like, where do you find your role in sort of the visibility of the things you've been able to accomplish, and your voice as as a champion of culture and creativity, but also like I need to be in my shell sometimes.
Yeah, well, really the goal for me is to leverage all that visibility and whatever success I've had into building a brand that actually becomes more of like an incubator, or it's more of a, where we're more like a curating force in the industry, and it does more aggregating, you know what I'm saying, and creates opportunities for other, not just Black creatives, but anyone that comes from a more untraditional place like I have, meaning like not everyone has the opportunity to go to film school and art school, and most of my DMs are flooded with people that have really great ideas and have a lot of talent, but they have no idea about how to get their foot in the door. And I feel obligated to take the success that I've had and create opportunities for other people, or else what am I doing it for? Like, I'm not in this just for me, and I've been trying to work with other peers of mine to see that we stand to gain so much more together, but it's a little hard, because a lot of people, like I said, they want to see their name in the trades, and they want to, or they want to be the guy in Hollywood, the Black this and the Black, But if we were to actually like come together, we can actually create more of a legacy, and something equivalent to a Black Disney or Pixar, with even more verticals, is what I have envisioned. So that's what we've been doing with Martian Blueberry. We've been working really, really hard to create that foundation. So, so it's kind of like I like to look at it as like the Underground Railroad. You know what I'm saying? It's like I got TV shows and films that are out there where I go the more traditional route and doing it. But with Martian Blueberry, we're exploring all these other verticals even before going to Hollywood. So we're establishing publishing rights for creatives and putting out, you know, graphic novels and comics and also collectible toys, apparel, you know, and really establishing your IP and creating a pre-existing, you know, property before you even go to Hollywood and start selling your soul. You know,
it went dark quick.
Yeah.
Remember the song "Beach Chair" by Jay-Z? It's fine if you don't.
I'm proud. If you,
it's very like ominous and melodic and almost like trip hoppy. But he talked about this song one day and he's like, "This is the kind of music I've been wanting to make." Right, but he's like, the industry and the audience response and the money has informed, you know, the other songs and the music that he's made, and I feel like most creatives have that thing. Like, I really envision myself this way, but I kind of have to exist this way. What's your beach chair? What's your relationship with the concept?
Oh man, well, it's funny because the thing that I want to do, I guess my magnum opus would be to do the equivalent of something like a Star Wars, but very black, and you know, because I'm heavy into like African cosmology and Egyptian studies, Sumerian teachings, and I'm a big space cadet, so like I'm into like extraterrestrials, quantum physics, and all of that stuff. But you don't see a lot of those worlds existing, you know, within our stories. You know what I'm saying? Because I don't understand, like, how come we can't have a Harry Potter in Harlem, or like why can't E.T. come to Crenshaw? you know what I'm saying? Like,
I once wrote a sketch called B.E.T. and it was Black Extraterrestrial.
That's hilarious.
Yes.
That's funny. That's funny.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
No, but that's really the thing. Those are the kind of things that get me excited when we can, like, you know, I don't know, tap more into like magic and more like black surrealism, you know what I'm saying? And not just do a lot of either trauma porn, you know, or.
Oh my gosh. Every time I'm like, I can't watch that.
Yeah, like, it's rough.
I can't.
We watched a movie, I can't remember, it was a series, I can't remember, but they had like black babies in a burlap sack and they were like banging them against the wall. I was just like, what? I don't even, like, who's
this for? Like, I mean,
and I'm like, okay, I get it. It was hard, but do we have to see this? Like, right. I mean, you know, over and over again, you know, like to the point where slavery has almost become a genre, you know, in Hollywood. It's like, but anyways, I'm just saying it's oversaturated, and like, it's like they made money off slavery, and now they still make money off slavery.
Wow.
But I do think like. For example, right, I was talking with some friends of mine in Ghana, and they actually connected me with the folklore board in Ghana. Like, there's a whole like sector of I guess it's not the government, but there's people that come together just to preserve the stories in Ghana, and they have tons of them, hundreds of them, if not thousands, that no one has ever seen or heard before, but they're there to preserve the integrity of those stories. So like, a Marvel doesn't just come through and just snatch stuff out and then do something that's way beyond like the principles that they were trying to instill with the stories. So those are the things that get me excited. Like, going to some of these places like Brazil and you know, Nigeria, and actually like tapping into the stories from all over the diaspora, and actually even bringing, you know, black directors from the U.S. and partnering them with producers in Ghana or Sudan, or, you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Like, that stuff gets me excited, you know. And telling unconventional stories that star black characters is also.
Good luck. No, I'm kidding. No, I'm just kidding. I think I was gonna say. I'm gonna do this anyway. So, just a little comparative analysis: Seis Manos or Parasite?
Parasite.
Okay.
Yeah, I fuck with Parasite.
Scissor 7 or Tekken Bloodline?
Pass.
Ooh. One Punch Man or One Piece?
One Piece. God, those are some good questions, bro. Those are some good. Go ahead. Why am I sweating?
It's the hoodie. I've never seen a turtle sweat. The turtle sweat, that's my new cologne. Richard Pryor or Dick Gregory?
Richard Pryor. all day.
Red Hot or Louisiana?
Neither.
Oh, you're not a hot sauce.
No.
connoisseur.
I'm a vegan. I'm a Dr. Savy baby.
Oh yeah, you did post something from Dr. Say.
Yeah.
What about his teaching speak to you?
I mean, just the plant-based diet and overall just like his approach to nutrition and natural healing. And he was a friend of mine, so like he taught me everything about herbs and actually like I corrected a lot of issues that I was dealing with at the time. Nothing really serious, but stuff that could have eventually become a problem if I didn't give some attention to him. So yeah, he's the truth, bro.
You have a new relationship with yoga. What's your intentionality and experience with it so far?
Well, it's interesting because when I first started doing it, it was more like an exercise, right? But I started getting more into what yoga actually means, and coming from the root word yogi, which means union. And I started getting more into the meditative side of it also, and like using it as an opportunity to just create more of a connection with all, and like that is, so there's a kind of like a more spiritual path that starting to take.
Absolutely. I've been like avid yoga for maybe 5 or 6 years now, like 3 times a week. I'm just now like at a space where I'm like, oh, now I get it. Yeah. So Steph Curry, Seth MacFarlane, and Norman Lear walk into a bar, and you're there, and then Good Times becomes a thing. I don't know how much you can speak to it, but it is out in the world. But it made me think about this idea of adaptation, even like adopting yoga through American lens. But like, there's a balance of preserving the essence of things in their original state, but also updating them, inserting your voice. You've got these pretty powerful creative voices that are part of the experience, and it goes back to this idea of consensus. Like, how do you take something like that that's so precious to Americana, I'll say it that way, and turn it into, hit the refresh button on it?
Well, I would never hit the refresh button unless if I had a real passion for a specific take on it. Like I don't believe in just doing it because it exists. Even if the studio's like, we own Good Times, we just need to do another Good Times. And a lot of times that is the approach. Like, we own it, why not keep doing it? Or Fast and the Furious 107 work, let's do 20 more. But in this case, I actually, to be honest, my first question was why. I was like, because they came to me and said, yeah, we're trying to do this. I was like, but why? I don't really understand. Like, Good Times exist, so why do another one? And so I said, you know what? Let me wrap my head around it. I talked to Love about it, and we just started like, throwing some ideas around. And basically, where I found the inspiration, because I'm always just looking for, I just need something I can like hook into, because right now I don't get it. But I just realized, I'm like, well, there's some commentary that can be said about how much the Black experience has not changed from the 70s till today, right? And showing the parallel struggles that still exist. And so I said, well, how about we do an animated version of Good Times with a brand new Evans family set in modern day Chicago, but alongside of the problems that exist in Black America, you also have all the problems that exist in the world now that are very, very, it's a very different America. Very, very different, I guess, geopolitical approach, right?
Yeah.
Like, because, this is also like after Trump, and you know what I'm saying? So there's a lot of things that I think that we could speak to. And because it's animated, right, we can even do some things that are really, really out there, in terms of like satire and social commentary. So, like I had this one pitch where I wanted there to be like kind of like this underground Wakanda beneath the projects, right? So it's like where there's like so people see like a lot of stereotypical kind of struggle Black, what we've seen before, like but then underneath it there's a whole civilization, a whole kingdom. You know what I'm saying? Like there's stuff like that you can do in animation. That got me like excited, because I'm like, okay, now there's something I could say. Then I can also talk about how the projects are like an actual government project. So whereas Michael on Good Times was kind of like the, like he was like the more militant one, right? So we had a character like that, but they were kind of woke in a different way. So they were like, like, oh, so the projects in Chicago are basically like test dummies for the rest of America. So they could be running experiments, you know what I'm saying, to see how the people in the projects do before they put this on the whole entire American population. So it's like stuff like that. But I'm no longer involved with that shit.
Okay. Well, and is this the full circle for Bernie?
I can't say.
Is this the full circle?
I can't say.
Okay. All right. Last but not least, because I love that story, and it leads to I have so many things I want to talk to you about. But is it more important for you to push cultural boundaries or creative boundaries?
God. Well, I'll answer it this way. In order for you to really push cultural boundaries, you have to be extremely creative, you know, because, you know, I mean, look, there's already this thinking that, you know, our stories are not universal or global. And that's something that I still fight to this day. And my thing is, because, you know, this comes from a place of like, okay, if you have a person that's from a very unique set of circumstances, it has a very specific vernacular, and even their attitude comes from in context with where they, you know, depending on what kind of environment they grow up in. If they grow up in the hood, there's a certain kind of, you know what I'm saying, certain type of disposition. And sometimes that could come off to studios or networks as a character that's not, you know, unfavorable or not likable, or they can't, or they think that it's not palpable for a global audience. Like, but I think it's the opposite way. You know, I think it's the more specific, the more culturally specific the characters in the worlds are, I think the more it appeals to everyone because it's authentic, right? But that's not the way that they look at it, especially since streamers are so global now. They're trying to think of a way they could check off all these boxes and please everybody with one single thing. And so you have to be really creative with how you translate the culture to the world, you know, and sometimes you got to be a little bit of a politician because you have to not only put it in the art, you have to also have a way of explaining it to the gatekeepers, you know. So there's, you know, I give an example of hip hop all the time, you know, because hip hop was a very specific kind of art form that only spoke to maybe a couple of blocks, or, you know.
Absolutely.
And now it's you can go to Poland and they know the lyrics to Wu-Tang, you know. So, and Wu-Tang was damn near rapping in hieroglyphics. Like, who knew what they was talking about, you know? So, but I think if it's honest, you know, it'll translate. But you have to be really creative sometimes to get it out there, you know.
Yeah.
You know, it's not an easy thing to do. I still struggle with it.
Well, especially like in comedy, you know, and I think comedy presses up against a lot of lines of offense. And as we are a more hypersensitive culture, I revel in the people who find a lane to like still be racy or provocative or like, oh, I can't believe you said that. But it's like they found a way to be hands off of like, you know, with no one's hands around a throat.
But you know what? But I think the platforms are more hypersensitive than the audience because they're just afraid of, because a lot of times I see a blog site and they'll say the internet reacts to such and such and such, and then I go read the comments and I'm like, wait, no one's saying that.
It's like, oh, a tweet that got like, you know, that person has 10,000 followers and they got 300 reposts. It's like, that's such a small percentage of the world and of the, you know, of the country if you want to be U.S. centric.
Right. Or the one person that did react to whatever it was, you go to their page and they got 12 followers. It's like, this guy represents all of Twitter? Like, I don't understand, you know. But the networks are hypersensitive because even if the narrative is out there at all, they're afraid that it may have some recourse. So I think they are overreacting more so than even the actual people are being hypersensitive, you know. But I don't know. I think we'll grow out of it. It's just going to take some time.
Yeah, depending on the thing. Carl Jones, thank you for joining Masters of Craft.
Oh, thank you for having me, man. This was fun.
Yeah. All right.
Awesome.
Yay. Oh, hello, everybody.